Welcome to Dave and Dharm Demystify, a FinTech Futures podcast, helping make sense of the world of FinTech and digital finance. Please sit back and listen as the two Ds take a subject and discuss it to make it clearer and easier to understand.
Demystify.
Welcome to the Dave and Dharm Demystify show, and this week we're going to demystify financial advice. Robo-financial advice, I think, really. But hey, before we do that, let's introduce our very esteemed speaker, Helena Wardle. And Helena, do you want to give us a little bit of background about yourself and tell us what your company does, please?
Yeah, so I'm Helena Wardle. I'm a chartered financial planner. I've been one for donkey's years. If I'd say how many years I've been advising clients, I'll totally give away my age, which is not great because Whoop still tells me I'm 30. But I have been helping clients with money for absolutely ages. And it really struck me that we weren't creating digital solutions that will help people with less money access advice. So that really gave Money Means, the FinTech that I'm building, its grounding, because my friends couldn't afford to pay for advice. And I was really troubled by the fact that people can only access advice if they've got significant levels of wealth, but really the difference you can make to people by helping them sooner is enormous. And clients always used to say to me, I wish I did this sooner. And it's not the time to tell them, yes, you should. And it really bugged me that we weren't creating solutions that were actually helping people in a meaningful way. And that's why I set out to create Money Means. And that's been an insane journey of learning. I definitely didn't set out to be a tech entrepreneur. I can promise you that. Most of my team will tell you already that, if the tech is not intuitive, I can't work it. So, I'm probably an excellent tester from that perspective. But I recognize that the only way you could create something that helps people that's affordable is by using technology. So I set out to create a service that will deliver that. And we've had lots of learnings along the way and made a lot of progress. But it's led us to creating AIDA, which is our AI digital advisor, which is effectively where I'm trying to clone my day job and what I did for people by training and teaching AI to do that. That's quite non-technical terms, so people might pick up that it's fine-tuning or whatever else they might call it. But in my mind, what I'm doing today is training AI in the same way I trained advisors in my business, which is I'm teaching it how to actually use a client situation, nuances, how to sort of understand people, how to bring it to life, how to ask the right questions, how to explain things simply. And that is effectively a huge part of what financial planners and financial advisors do.
I mean, this is a hot topic because most people in the industry, it reminds you of solicitors, to be fair, right? And solicitors, you say, AI will never take over our job. There's so much stuff that a machine can't do this, right? And the same has been said about financial advice. And that two things. We've got all these regulations, right? Regulations, that's going to stop it. And then the other thing is, well, it's not just advice. It's about relationships with people. Machines can't take over relationships with people. That's the two excuses, which I've always never believed myself personally. But you are the expert. What's your view on these two aspects specifically around AI?
They won't wash. So there's a couple of points that to sort of help support why I think that. First of all, the top use of AI today for consumers is therapy. So tell me a relational aspect that's any more private than that. AI is being used mostly by people for therapy. How on earth could you say that a relational role will not be replaced by AI? I think it's utter nonsense. And I think the reason that the industry think that is because a huge amount of the AI innovations at the moment has been concentrated around processes. Now, if you think about the full advice process as an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the 2 hours or 3 hours that an advisor spends with a client. So that is the most valuable piece for them. That's what they really care about. That's where they really engage with. That's why they stick to it. Advice has got 95% retention rates on ongoing clients. The clients really value the service. It's those couple of hours with the client that really creates most of that value. The stuff underneath It's the processes, the data gathering. A full advice process on average takes anywhere, if it's simple, 10, 12 hours to complex 30 hours of work. So if we take that example that 2 to 3 hours is with a client, all of that other bank of work is being automated by AI at the moment, or quite significant amounts of it. So the industry is focusing on the stuff that clients don't value. They're focusing on making automations around suitability letters as a regulatory requirement, compliance checks, gathering data, that kind of stuff. So they're really focusing on stuff that is actually costing or adding to the cost of advice, but it's not what clients value. So they're not actually seeing the potential or the opportunity in using conversational AI. That is my belief, because they don't see and understand that people are prepared and willing to interact in that way. They are prepared to sort of engage with things, even if they know it's AI, and actually their preference is to know it's AI. They don't want to be lied to, but it can't be a chatbot. If we're thinking of replacing financial advisors with a Q&A chatbot, then that's also not going to work. So we need to think about what is the opportunity for the industry to create an expert-trained model. So what does an expert-trained model look like? What does something look like that replicates all the different aspects of financial advice, which includes the bank of processes, but is more focused on how do you hold a conversation? How do you engage someone? How do you help challenge someone? How do you explain concepts to them? How do you help them understand the why? Now, an example that's very simple, say you put a query into ChatGPT and you ask ChatGPT, how should I invest my money? The first major flaw with that is ChatGPT does not know anything about you that's going to make that response more personal, specific, and actionable. So it won't know anything about your financial circumstances. It might know some things because it has memory, but it won't know things like concepts that have you used your ISA allowance? What's your current situation around emergency funds? Do you spend less than you earn? Are you in a position to invest? And none of the responses you're getting from models are actually asking those questions to users to say, okay, you've asked me how you should invest. Let's explore what is your current situation. Have you ever seen that in a response from an AI model on any topic? You haven't, because it doesn't happen. But this is what I mean when I say an expert-trained model. It's using the expertise and understanding of what you need to know and why, and helping AI understand how to use that data to then get the consumer to a better outcome. So that's what I mean with expert-trained models. The second part to the answer is I think we are totally underestimating the disruption that's coming to service industries. Now, if we think about what happened to retail when the internet really started, it was slightly slow, but it sped up pretty fast. And it disrupted retail and how we shop today enormously. Every single service industry will face the exact same disruption, whether it's legal, accountancy, GP, whatever, because you will be able to get that knowledge, understanding, depth, and decision-making, decision-thinking into a model. Now, it won't be perfect because as humans, there's an element of it's not just language that actually leads to decisions. We need to remember that. I'm not talking about AGI because I'm not buying that we're there yet. So what I'm talking about is do not underestimate the ability for AI to replicate 80, 90% of what you do in your work. And I think that's people are resistant because they don't actually see the use case that clearly, because there's not any clear examples, but I know they're being worked on. So you will imagine in a few years' time, we will have an AI GP. You can imagine that in a few years' time, we will have an AI lawyer. You can imagine that, we'll have AI tutors, AI teachers, AI professors. Every single service industry, you will get that support. I genuinely believe that. So the businesses that are better placed to dealing with that disruption are the ones that are embracing it. And I find it's a lack of imagination and a lack of understanding of the limitations, but also the potential of the tech.
I'm interested because I think you talk about the expert trained models. Are you starting with a model and training an existing available model and training it up? What's the approach you're taking for that?
I think from a technology perspective, the orchestration matters the most. So it's a good point because I can give you an example. So yes, we are using a model, but we're orchestrating it in a way to work with how we want it to work. So the things like understanding the user's context, their situation, that's one part of it. The knowledge base. So we don't want the model to draw from all of the web. We don't want it to draw from sources that we haven't created. So we have a knowledge base. Then we have the conversational aspect. So how do we train it to actually understand tone, how to understand hesitation, how to understand human language in terms of how people want to interact, how to engage, how to coach them, how to explain things, what tone to use, how to reduce jargon. So the conversational aspect is critical because that's your engagement piece. And then lastly, it's about knowing what it's weak at. So from a regulatory perspective, we knew we could not risk AI doing any calculations. We could not risk it doing any outputs. We could not risk it creating any sort of assumptions or workings off the back of that context. So we have a completely deterministic system doing that. And then on top of that, we bring in open banking and analytical systems like Morningstar to give that deterministic tools. So the tools that I would use as an advisor. So if I want to show someone, this is why it's a good idea, I'd give them a scenario and I'd show them, this is if you stay as you are, this is if you change it, and that's why I believe you should do that. So that's forecasting. We use a method called stochastic forecasting because it runs multiple scenarios. So you plug those things into the model and you orchestrate it to work in a way that it will come to a good decision. And then you evaluate those decisions to make sure it's consistent and meets the requirements that you're looking to meet. So it's multiple aspects to it. And it's how you actually create the system that matters. So we can plug in a different LLM and we will still get the same outcome.
Interesting. So, and from what you're saying there is a human element to it as well. So there has to be, before the advice comes out, plops out the other end, somebody saying, yeah, this makes sense. Is that, or have I misunderstood?
No, there's no human oversight. But what has happened in our business, and I think it will happen more and more, is that as a financial advisor, I work very closely with the tech team. So the inputs and how we shape things and what decision trees looks like and how the outcome works, is the architecture has been shaped as much by me as a non-tech person than it has by the techie people in the business. Does that make sense? Because yes, I'm naturally quite geeky and I have dived very deep in AI for quite some time. And it's spotting use cases in different scenarios and then running experiments to see, okay, this is what I'm understanding it does in that industry. This is what I think it could do for what I know we did in this thing. Can we make it work? So it's been a very collaborative process.
But when it comes to the regulations, and what I mean by this is that, like, Dave and I can't be financial advisors because we have to pass a certain number of exams, right? And that's how the regulator knows that we're qualified to give this advice. But if a machine does it, doesn't also have to do the same thing?
That's a very good point. I believe the same. So what we did earlier this year is we approached the CII, which is our professional body that does the diploma in financial planning. So it does the exams for advisors to level 4 that they need to get to be able to advise clients. And we said to them, we'd like to run our model through the exams because we believe that standard should be maintained. And we did. As a benchmark, we took ChatGPT through the same exams. So we did both. Effectively, as a short, ChatGPT failed 2 exams, so it would never have qualified. It failed the tax exam. So as I said, it's not good at calculations. There's also a hell of a lot of nuance in financial planning. If someone gives 10% in their will to charity, their inheritance tax rates reduce. It can't cope with that. It just can't cope with that level of detail. It needs expert information. And secondly, it failed the most important one, which is the financial planning exam, the one that pulls together, here's a customer situation, here's some questions, let's see if you can actually help them. And it failed both of those, which is terrible. It also very nearly failed the pensions exam. So ChatGPT failed, AIDA aced it. So she scored high 90s for the exams, and we knew she would. The challenge we've had since is that obviously AIDA is not human, and therefore the CII won't give her a qualification. And we've worked with them to think about developing an accreditation system for consumer-facing LLMs to help raise the standard and trust in these solutions, because I really believe that's critical and important. So in answer to your question, we've done it and she's aced it.
Wow. Sorry, I'm just thinking practically though. So if AIDA gives someone advice, where's the liability for the advice? Because I guess my daughter's just going through the exams and I know they're pretty tough, actually. I thought in my day you'd have just turned up, smoked a fag, and they'd have handed you the golden keys to everybody's money. Whereas my poor daughter seems to be spending all her life kind of revising. And I think it's great. Actually, I think having those checks and balances in place and making sure that people do understand what's going on is great. But it does mean that that accreditation means something in terms of if I come back, there's recourse as a kind of client. Whereas with AIDA, it doesn't sound like there is the same recourse.
There will be. So let me explain why. So first of all, money means is regulated. So we are authorized and regulated by the FCA. We, at this stage, are only giving guidance. There's a distinct difference. Guidance is when you help someone, you give them support and you help them find a solution. Advice is when you specifically recommend what solution they take. So it's not increase your pension savings. It's increase your pension savings in a Vanguard pension, 100% lifestyle, whatever. You know, that is specific advice. Guidance can actually help people enormously just with direction and action. We will give regulated advice. That is the plan. So we will be stepping into that advice, and the liability will be money means is liability. So we will have that. The one thing that you pick up on that I think is critical is the exams is not a strong enough accreditation for LLMs, because the way it works.
Why does it have to be stronger for a machine than for a person?
Because the scale of harm is higher. One, you can reach a lot more people.
Yes, okay.
Secondly, the most important thing is you need to really test for inconsistencies and hallucinations. So a better framework is an evaluation system. So not an exam, but an evaluation system that will work in a similar way that can run 1,000 simulations, not just one answer. Does that make sense? So how we test our model is by running simulations to check that we get inconsistencies. So the same test can apply to other LLMs. And that's where I think the regulator and the industry should move to, because that will create much more robust systems that we know won't cause consumer harm.
Yeah, but if Dave was my advisor, my human advisor, and he had a bad day and then mess up with me and gave me some poor advice, there's nothing that regulations catch for that. I mean, it just seems like we want belt and braces for a machine, but for human beings, we allow them to be human and make errors.
It's the same as with automated cars, isn't it? Nobody's trusting them. But, you know, people cause accidents too. I totally get your point. I think, and I agree with it, because there's how much bad advice is not cool. That there's a lot to say in that, because people won't know. But this is why I'm proud of what we're building, because I do want to go out and say, right, this has got such a strong stamp of trust that, you know, this is how we're going to make sure it's right. This is how we're going to make sure it's consistent, and that we're building something that will actually make a big difference to people's lives. So
it's interesting as well. I mean, I've just written an article, which I think is going to come out on Friday, where Dharmesh and I were all over agentic and AI at the moment, mainly because there's a rich seam of kind of content opportunity. But I was imagining an AI app in the future, which kind of grows with somebody. So it's kind of a cradle to grave. It knows everything about you. I mean, we're not that far away from that, are we? Because from what you're saying, the AIDA itself will be able to get to know you from a kind of financial point of view, but it's not a million miles away from, okay, let's start plugging in other bits of data to understand you even more, is it?
We've purposely locked it down on finances, I think, because it's a can of worms I'm not trying. I'm ready to open, to be very honest with you. But I think money does underwrite a lot of your life. If you think about it, it's a core part of many people's decisions and what they do and what we earn and what we spend time and money on. So I do think it's important. And I do think that generally speaking, people underestimating the impact AI will have on our lives and how we work with products and solutions going forward. enormously just from speaking to friends. I just feel like I'm an alien having a conversation sometimes because I'm just not interested in thinking like that. But I think it's true. I genuinely think it's true. I think it's going to happen.
But to Dharm's point around relationship, you do read lots and lots of stories about people building relationships with AI. And of course, like these LLMs are designed to want to engage you. You know, the way they talk to you, the way they interact is, I mean, it's one of the curiosities of finance is I've observed over the years is what people do like in their own personal time and then what they do professionally kind of are two different things. And I think this is a good example where people are using AI for everything from planning holidays to, as you say, getting support for mental health issues. So it's puzzling that people then can't take that leap into saying, well, of course this could start providing financial advice.
I mean, Dave inspired me to write a piece last week about emotional banking, right? Because one of the things that we kind of forget, and I've been in banking for 40 years, and the penny has only just kind of dropped, but actually money is emotional. Like how we spend it, what we do with it, it's an emotional thing. Yet we're not using any of the emotional indicators in our advice. And so I wrote a piece that's saying that, look, what banks need to do to get closer to their customers is this thing, what Dave has coined, a relationship experience. It's from user experience to relationships. And for that, I've said you need an emotional kind of banking infrastructure that understands people's emotions. I mean, but what you're saying, Helena, is it just temporary that you're not going to look at that aspect of the emotions, or is it part of what you're looking at already?
So no, we definitely incorporate that already. So we're not thinking like that. What I'm saying is I don't think money means is right now setting out to run people's whole lives. So as a financial planner, I saw that all the time. And it's cues and emotional intelligence that you use to help people. I'll give you some concrete examples. So as a planner, I knew that generally speaking, people were quite nervous about money. They often felt shame. They often felt they were being bad. And they would use language like, oh, I know I should have done this before. Or I really should have gotten a grip on this. And yeah, I don't know why I left it for so long. So one of the things I always used to do is I'd find something that they did with money that worked really well and praised it. Because we will really just tell ourselves we're rubbish and they don't always spot the things that they do well. That was an excellent decision. Well done. That's really paid off for you. You can see how that's helped you. So it's about understanding the balance of, I'm not saying I psychoanalyze people, but I just had a really good way with people and I understood how to relax them. I understood how to help them. I understood how to move them to a position where they're moving forward. The intention is to help people take action. And as a result of that, if you do not understand the emotional side that impacts on that, then it's really going to struggle. Now, one thing we are exploring, which I think is incredibly interesting, is that how do you actually train AI to learn those sorts of coaching methods and instincts, really, because it's human instincts that cause me to do those kind of things. And one way to consider is trying to teach it an advisor's worldview, try to teach the nuances, the relational aspect, how you engage and interact with a client. Because when a new advisor joined my business, my face-to-face advice business, the way we would train them is that they would spend months observing. So they'd literally just sit in the meetings, make notes, learn. And it's really scary to start seeing the blend of different advisors. So if they're observing different advisors, you can see the blend of what they pick up and how they do their own spin on it. Now, nothing stops you from teaching AI that, so how do you do that? So one way could be to use video training. So video recordings of real interactions with customers and train AI rather than just a written instruction. So it learns the cues, it understands how to do that. It's quite cutting edge. It's not something that's been widely used, but it's one way that you could perhaps do that at a higher level. But there's already a lot around natural language processing that can do huge amounts of that. But I just don't see that being enough because it doesn't have that gut instinct of How do you actually overcome an objection? Can you actually see just from language what someone is struggling with? What is it that they're not understanding? What is not clear to them? What is making them hesitate? And I just wonder where that will lift it to. I haven't got an answer, by the way.
I guess one of the promises of AI as well is the ability to show things to people in different ways. So, what I'm about to say will so horrify Dharmesh but I find it really difficult to read forms. I find it really difficult. For some reason, I start at the top and will never get to the bottom. And if you think about finance, how forms form so much of what needs to happen. If there was a sort of, a Dave and Dharm podcast of the form where Dharmesh talks me through it as an output, that would be so much better for me, because I tend to absorb complex information by hearing rather than reading. So the opportunity for that is incredible, isn't it?
I totally agree. And that's an incredibly astute point, because I noticed it as an advisor. So one thing I used to ask clients at the start of meetings is, help me understand how you make decisions and what you get stuck on. So let's talk through, do you like lots of information? Do you want bullet points? Do you need me to make things look pretty? And I always use myself an example, because I'm never without a notebook and I'm always jotting down notes. So that's how I take information in, and that's how I learn. So understanding people's preferences and things that there's barriers for them is critical. And you can do it at scale, because what advisor will remember all 150 of their clients' little nuances like that? It would be really difficult. AI doesn't have that challenge. So the way to create a much more dynamic and proactive service is by using AI. And I think that's enormously exciting, because it will help people in all those little differences of how we think and make decisions and what gets in our way, in a way that you just can't do, I think, with a human relationship at the moment, because you just don't have enough time with each other.
How far will you take that, do you think? And what I mean by that is, I have this model called the single brain, which is you have a load of sensors on the outside, lots of different inputs coming in, goes to the AI models, it analyzes what you need to do, and then it decides to take action. And in the action, we typically have what people think is personalization, is changing the screen to look slightly different for Dave than for Dharm, right? And actually what I would prefer, or what Dave might prefer, is his financial plan coming to him as a podcast. What I might prefer is a document that I can see lots of stats and charts and a little bit of text for me to go through, but they're radically different. It's not the way that humans have done it in the past, but it's absolutely the way that Dave and I individually would prefer. Will you take it that far?
Yeah, the plan is fully to. So I'll give you simpler examples, because it's not quite sending out podcasts yet. I'll put it on the backlog and my CPO will kick my ass. But what we're thinking of is more around, what is the person's experience? What's their decision-making style? Do they prefer visuals? What have they engaged with before? What is their preferences? Did they prefer certain things to be voiced? Do they prefer certain things to be text? Understanding that behavioral aspect of what people engage with and using that in a positive way so that we can help them in the way that they're used to. So yes, definitely we are looking at that. So we're not looking at, so traditionally, this is a horrible word, but advisors do what we call a fact find. So you build a picture of the customer. It's what's required to give advice. It's, know your customer as a FCA requirement for suitability. We're taking that to a level of including those sorts of aspects so that we really understand what's someone's debt behavior, what's their attitude to debt. That kind of stuff really helps make interventions and support much more personalized, because if someone said, I really regret spending that on a credit card, and, they're looking to do that again, can you use AI to intervene? Can you support with ways to try and create rules for people? Because there's lots of behavioral psychology that can support with that. So if someone wants to change a habit or start a habit, there's different sorts of aspects that you can use that's been through research proven to work that can be applied to a system like this. But you cannot apply it that easily to a human advisor, because the open banking connection means we get real data. And that real data and that connection just enhances what we can offer as advisors beyond what face-to-face advice can do. And that bit I'm really excited about, because I think that level of proactiveness will just help so much more than just sitting down with someone annually for a review and then telling them, by the way, I changed my job 6 months ago. That shouldn't happen, but it does. So that's the kind of level we're trying to put into this. But it's hugely iterative. You've seen a bit as to what we can do now, but we are going to take it to a level that doesn't exist yet. And I'm really confident that we've got the right people to do that.
I think one of the things I found interesting about advice over the years is you don't get a lot of advice. Like, as you say, you tend to have a few meetings, and then, I mean, even in this day and age, what you get is valuations, which you can get on your mobile phone now, but who knows whether they're up to date. I mean, the whole kind of experience is pretty limited. I guess the reason being is there is a sort of financial model which underpins financial advice, which means that having customers talking to you too much means you don't make a lot of money out of those customers, potentially. I can see you didn't think that was quite... Anyway, but from an AI point of view, it doesn't matter how many times someone's talking to the model, does it?
Correct. I think approachability has always been an issue in financial advice, because if you think about it, the relationship is already skewed because you've got an expert, less than the expert. And often what I've seen is that people don't always feel like they can bother advisors with certain things, or maybe I shouldn't ask that, or, I don't want to look stupid, that kind of thing. I think those hesitations will be completely removed within an AI system. But there was a fantastic piece of research that was done by a company called Vageful. So Vageful is like Trusted Trader or Trustpilot for financial advisors specifically. They have hundreds of thousands of customer reviews, and they did a huge amount of qualitative research on those reviews. And the clients that were more engaged with financial advisors were the ones that were speaking to them at least 4 times a year. And I see fantastic planning firms where clients would ask them questions around anything because the advisor is that approachable that the customer feels completely able to do that. And that is what I think is just, unfortunately, probably a difference in standard. There's fantastic advisors that look after their clients incredibly well, but there's probably some advisors who are just doing the bare minimum, and that isn't reflective of what the service actually is and what the value of the service is. And I think that the big difference to me is that it's physically impossible for people to always know what they should tell their advisor, because they won't think that changing that job means X, Y, Z, that changes what we've done here, because they don't know. So you're never going to get that level of proactiveness, even if the advisor is fantastic, because you cannot send clients with a massive checklist to say, if these 15 things change, please get in touch before our review. I did used to tee clients up to say, anything financial comes up, please contact me. I'm happy to help, even if it's just all okay, don't worry about it. And not surprisingly, my most common email in that sense wrote to me, can you please tell me what they mean? Which is sad that we still have that problem, that the language we use is so confusing, people don't read their statements. But you cannot be as proactive as an advisor as AI can be if it's plugged into the data. And I think that's a real differentiator. So my challenge that I've raised I've been a bit cheeky with some of the financial advisors in the industry, as you can imagine, when I'm spoken at events. And the one sort of question I had a few times is, will this make advisors redundant? Because actually seeing this, it does get absolutely living daylights out of them, I'm not going to lie, because it can do a lot of what they do. And my answer to that is, how will you convert customers or clients who are using a digital service to a face-to-face service that's 10, 15 times more expensive if the value add is not significantly different? Now, in certain circumstances, extremely complex advice, very vulnerable moments such as bereavement, that kind of stuff, I can see that. But in general, if the next generation grows up or uses a digital advisor like AIDA, I think it'd be very tough to convert it to face-to-face advice.
Just on this side of things, the problem that I have with advisors is the human limitations. And you touched a little bit on this at the beginning, but I've had more than one advisor at points in time because I needed a mortgage versus I needed investments versus I needed some retirement planning. And on top of that, apart from the product stretch, one of the things you mentioned earlier on, there's things like inheritance tax that now, because I'm old, I have to start thinking about, right? And when I was at Temenos, I sold some shares and I wanted to try and minimize the tax I paid. And I had to speak to a solicitor to talk about some of the rules behind share schemes and stuff. And suddenly I now need a team, right? I need a solicitor, a tax advisor, a financial advisor, a financial planner, and whatever else, right? But can you see, Dave and I have been looking at this whole area of agentic. I can certainly see a solicitor and an accountant AI talking to your AI and together giving me the team that I need for everything. What do you think about that? Do you think that will happen?
100%. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, 100%. I do see that collaboration because I think having put in what we've put in to build AIDA to this stage, you'd need true expertise. You can't ask the pharmacist to build a AI GP. You just can't. It's not going to be the same. And I see a lot of these products and solutions come out, great intentions, but you just listen to the language that they're using. They do not understand financial advice. I can do anything an advisor does. I can aggregate your holders and shove you into a new investment. I can tell you now that is 2 jobs I will never do. That is not what clients go through if they get full advice. It's an understanding of them. It's a strategic, what is right for you. It's telling them whether things are possible or not. There's so much to it that it's not just the funnel into an investment. That is the, big disservice that we still carry as a profession, that people think that's what we do. If you look at Reddit polls, etc., what does a financial advisor do? It's tell you where to invest. That's absolutely one of the jobs, but it's the end result of a process that actually makes sure that's right for people and that they have the right things in place and they're going in the right direction and it's the right solution for them. It's not about funneling people into investments. And I think that's why these services need experts to lead on. Like I said, I was very involved with the architecture. I'm still very involved with how we set it out. What's the decision trees? What's the logic? It's real expertise that's going into it because that's what's needed to make it work.
So when can we get our hands on AIDA?
Your name is basically AI Digital Advisor, but it's also attention, interest, desire, action. Because one of our main things is that we really want to engage people. We want people to take action. We want them to be better off. So we're putting the product live at the end of September. So it'll be a soft launch of a group of testers, and then we'll be launching later in the year. So it will be in the App Store, and she'll be ready to go soon.
Fantastic. I guess we're really running short on time, but again, I go back to my daughter who's doing financial planning and she wants to be part of that. I can see a future in which the advisors are using systems like AIDA as well. But, they're the last mile in terms of human contact. Because all said and done, there will be an awful lot of people who still want to talk to somebody, would you agree?
I think in some ways, yes, and others, no. So one of the biggest reasons why the traction on robo-investing has been so low is because effectively people don't feel confident to tick the box because the whole process is a bunch of boxes. Then you do a really rubbish personality questionnaire that tells you this is the risk level you do, and then you get shoved into investment. That is not going to give people confidence to proceed. And what we have seen is that engagement, that ability to ask questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? That's missing from digital journeys at the moment, and AI can totally bridge that gap. So I'm excited about what that means for the opportunities, but I also do think that there's not enough financial advisors in the UK actually to service the shortfall of people needing advice anyway. And I think that will become more like someone choosing to go to the gym or using a personal trainer. So I think that will be a preference, not a must, because at the moment it's not even an option for people.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us.
No worries.
I guess what's interesting is you're kind of bringing the theory to life. So I'm really interested to see what AIDA is like and how it works when it comes out.
Sign me up for the beta.
We want to be there for the beta test.
You do that.
Yeah, no, but very interesting. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Helena.
Yeah, thanks for letting me geek out. It was fun.
Thank you for tuning in to Dave and Dharm Demystify. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tune in next time as we take another topic and demystify it.